Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is an amateur. I'm not necessarily a professional in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just here to talk life, politics, ideologies, hobbies, what have you. And on today's episode, we're going to be reacting to a series of TikToks of a lot of women just talking about how they've not been approached romantically or what have you throughout their life and how that's affected them socially. And I just kind of thought this was interesting because in the manosphere, or however you want to call it, on the male side of this is typically referred to as incels or involuntary celibate. So I just thought it was interesting to provide the, I guess, female version, quote unquote, so to speak, and just my input on the effects of it. So without further ado,
those of us that were never asked out, never asked to any dances, never were shown any romantic interest.
I've wanted to make a response to this video for such a long time, but I couldn't find it, so I'm super glad I came across it today. First of all, the effect of not having received romantic validation during your formative years, like to the age of 18 or most likely older, cannot be understated. It's very real, and it will mess with you in a very deep, core way. But I actually wanted to talk about how that interacts with dating and entering the dating world as an adult. Dating in the modern age is very casual, but those of us who are late to the game can't treat it as casually as other people can, who have had all these experiences in like high school and college and stuff. I don't exactly know a great way to put this, but as an example, I know that if I were to receive flowers from someone or be held by them in a romantic way, there's like a 90% chance that I would just start breaking down crying. Ideally, the person you're dating should be able to take everything in stride, but at the end of the day, they're still a stranger, and that's a lot to...
So the first thing that I'll say with the first clip is it's definitely interesting to look between those that are celibate by choice versus those who are supposedly involuntarily celibate. And what I don't like about that is that it seems it's a balance of the dichotomy of the identity of self as well as the identity of society, as far as where identity, and as much as a lot of the leftism and a lot of those ideologies like to say that, you know, identity comes within, identity is actually a two-way street, and it depends on two different parties both agreeing on an identity. So it's identity of self as well as identity from an outside party. And so in the Christian perspective, our identity comes from God and not from society. And so our identity is based off who God says that we are in him, who God says we are in Christ, which is really, really important because it allows for our identity to not rest on society, rest on things that are changing, but it's resting on something that's constant, eternal. And it's just our job to also accept that identity that we have in Christ. So I think it's something where it is a two-way street, as far as if you're not going to put your identity in someone that's higher, something that's constant, and put in something that's always changing, as society is always changing, then it's going to be very difficult to really have that firm understanding of yourself, especially when a lot of us are told, so to speak, that our identity needs to become, at least from the men's side, I would think their identity needs to come from how many women they're able to sleep with, what their wealth status is, what their looks are, what have you. And for women, it's how feminine can they be, how poised, how beautiful, etc. Like, they also need to be the ones that are attracting the guys. And so for me, I am voluntarily celibate. I mean, I have had male attention or whatever that I've politely refused. Some might say impolitely, that's whatever. But the point of the matter is that, like, my identity doesn't come from what society thinks of me. It comes from what I think of myself as well as what God thinks of me. So I think that's just kind of an important dynamic, but I've spoken too much. On to the next part.
Scientists do a case study on those of us that were never asked out.
So I watched this video and I think it's relatable and her experiences are valid and stuff. But I think it would be even more interesting if the study was in an intersectional lens, meaning how this might affect people of like different races and stuff. I kind of have a theory that like white women who experience this, it's like they actually really kind of expect that type of romantic validation because they see it all around them in their peers and in media. And as a black person though, as a black woman, you often do not see that especially if you are in an area where there's not other Black people. And in mainstream media, there's not a ton of that either. So like, you don't even really expect it, and you don't necessarily doubt yourself. I mean, you do doubt yourself, but a big part of it is just like, oh, well, I'm not getting this attention because like I'm Black. It's because of my skin color, which is an integral part of your identity. It's funny how we don't have to wonder. We're just like, oh yeah.
Okay. I hate things like intersectionality, especially as it comes to the leftist ideology. But you know, you want to bring up race, let's bring up race, and the fact that we have a lot of fatherless homes in the Black community. I'm fortunately not one of them. That is something that I'm very, very blessed with, and I'm very, very thankful for. I know it was very hard for my parents, but you know, they stuck it out, stuck it through, whatever. But if we're going to talk about not having that representation, then that's not society's fault that Black people can't seem to stay together. Those are individual decisions from individual people, and it sounds kind of harsh, but like, you can't keep blaming the world for personal decisions that people make. And then the second thing that she brought up was like, I mean, I don't think it matters if you're white and not receiving attention from men the way that you want to, and you're Black and not receiving attention from men the way that you want to. I mean, it comes down to the point where looks are important, but they are not everything. So yes, looks are going to bring your foot in the door. They're going to have somebody look your way, but they're not going to always it's not going to be the thing that makes people stay. It's going to be your personality. It's going to be your character. It's going to be your values. It's going to be your beliefs. So it's not to discredit or disown the effects of, you know, what melanin has done. And, you know, people have their preferences. Not everyone's going to like Black people. Not everyone's going to like white people. Like, okay, don't take that personally. Find someone who does and move on. Next.
That were never asked out, never asked to any dances, never were shown any romantic interest whatsoever.
Okay, let's chat about this real quickly. That has been my entire experience, and I'm 24 years old. I remember in high school, I was never invited or asked to any like dances, homecomings, whatever. I never really dated in college. Male interest just isn't something that comes to me. I've never had a boyfriend, etc. Today, I'm completely fine with the fact that I've never had those experiences. But I remember there being a certain point in my life where it's like, wow, this happens for everyone else. Why isn't it happening for me? So I took that as an opportunity to look at myself less than as a woman, because I wasn't having these beautiful dating life experiences that everyone else around me was having. And I started to doubt myself and who I was. I've moved out of that thought process, and I've realized that that is not the case at all. But those life experiences and not having them really shaped a lot of my thought at one point in time, which wasn't good.
I don't really have much to say here. Just, again, about identity being two parts. So, like, I kind of get it with the transgender ideology, as far as with if they're saying that identity is one thing and society is not accepting it, that they can feel a type of way. But there's always a certain truth to something. So, like, with stuff like this, just being, like, just brutally honest with yourself, and there might be some things about you that are just not desirable to others, and like, that's okay. Like, it could just be that literally every single man just doesn't want, like, you don't attract any type of man. And it's like, that's something that's really hard and really difficult to face, or really difficult to accept. But it might be true. I really doubt it. I feel like with a lot of these ladies in these videos, it was more something like they weren't receiving the male attention from the right man. But there might have been somebody there, like, I can't say anything. This is them saying their truth and their lived experience. You know, I hate that, lived experience. Just say their experience. It's, you know, it's understood that it was lived. That's what makes it an experience. Besides the point. Anyway, the point of the matter is that me personally, like, I mean, these are not ugly ladies. They seem to have a fine personality. So with all the men out there, like, every single person, like, unless they were just completely isolated from men, I doubt that there was not one single man that gave them attention. It gave them the male attention that they say that they lacked. It was more of a fact that it wasn't from the right man, or they just weren't looking or weren't paying attention or something like that. But not trying to deny their truth. On to the next one.
Who needs a scientist when you've got your dad? For real. I'ma just tell you what my dad said, and he's not wrong. I brought this up a few weeks ago, and I was like, man, I ain't never been asked out on a date. I still don't have a boyfriend. He said said, it's because you have independent bitch energy. Not gonna lie, I was a little offended at first, but then he explained it as basically, you're a boss ass bitch. He said, you have independent energy, like it's written on your forehead. You don't even have to say it for men to know. And men are not attracted to that. Men want women that will take care of them. They can literally sniff out if you are independent. So they steer clear. And you know what? I ain't even mad because I'm not trying to take care of a grown-ass toddler for the rest of my life. You can get that from your mama. You was not getting it from me.
Okay, so yes and no. So I feel like this independent B energy is more of a masculine energy, a dominant energy, which women have. I'm sure I have it. I'm in a very predominantly male field, like it's gonna rub off, whatever. But it's just, again, heterosexual men do not want to date another man. They are interested in women, so they want things that are of woman. And so that's not to say that this independent energy is not necessarily feminine, because you can be independently feminine, but this independent B energy is just what I think the father is saying, is this masculine energy that tends to turn away a lot of masculine men, because that's not necessarily, they want a femininity to balance their masculinity. It's like really, really, really weird and difficult to boil down to, but it's just like, it's a matter of balance. And then also these men aren't, a lot of the men out here, they're independent, they're doing their own thing, they're not trying to be treated like a child. They just want a fellow, they want, I don't even want to say partner, because that's not really quite the word, but they want a strong, firm relationship where you can actually understand one another. I mean, again, her prerogative, she doesn't want that kind of man, then she's not going to get that kind of man, and vice versa. So just, again, it's all about honesty, being honest with yourself, being honest with others, and being honest with what you want. Next.
Those of us that were never asked out.
When I went away to college, I was so nervous because I had never been on a date, never been asked out, never asked to dance, let alone to a dance. And now I'm 26, and all of that is still true. Now, most days this doesn't really bother me, but some days it really fucking does. If you didn't already know, I'm asexual, which can make dating difficult. And a big part of me doesn't even want to try. The internalized misogynistic and fat-phobic part of me says, why would they want you now if they didn't even want you when you were younger and skinny? And then the ace part of me goes, girl, this is a good thing. You don't want to deal with their needs. Still, human beings crave connection, and when you're overlooked by your peers for the vast majority of your life, it can be like a hacksaw straight to your self-esteem. It becomes really easy to pick apart everything that could maybe be wrong with you. But there's nothing wrong with you. All those people that have been overlooking you just aren't ready to be with somebody as special as you are.
So, yes and no. The first thing I want to pick is, I just hate the words like internalized anything, internalized misogyny, internalized racism, internalized transphobia, or anything, because pretty much what it's saying is that you can't, if you have an identity, you have to think a certain type of way, and if you don't, then you're automatically being against yourself or what have you, and that's just not the case. So at least most of the time, I gotta, put those qualifiers there. But the second thing is, like, again, and this is not the Christian perspective per se. This is more so for me, but I think there's also still a reality. It's like, maybe you aren't everything that you're cracked out to be. And I might not be everything I'm cracked out to be, and that might be a reality I have to face. But point of the matter is, you always have to look at both sides and which side is the best explanation of what's going on. There's a lot of personal bias when you're evaluating yourself and you're not being honest and not having a objective identifier. But that's all I really got to say for that one. Next.
Scientists do a case study on those of us that were never asked out, never asked to any dances, never were shown any romantic interest.
Doll, can we have a little chat about this when I'm catching my breath on this hike? Boy, I watched this video and there are so many of you that can relate to what she said. Let me see if I can bring a little bit of understanding to what she's talking about, because during those developmental years, middle school, high school, even college, if our experiences are such that we are never desired, that we're never wanted, that we're not shown any of that attention, especially from the people that we are attracted to, then we determine things about ourselves such as something's wrong with me, or I'm not the kind that is desired. And here's the interesting thing. We treat those as if they're fact. And then we base our life going forward based on those facts. So yeah, why would I expect someone to flirt with me if I already feel like something's wrong with me? Why would I desire to be in a relationship long term if that never seemed like an option? You have to keep in mind, our brain is wired for survival. You know, if you want.
Okay. My take on how you start changing that again is making sure that your identity comes from something that's stable, something that's firm, which is God and God's word, and that's true. So, like, for me, I have been ridiculed and shunned or whatever for not having sex or for waiting till marriage to have sex, but it's just like, okay, I know that it's right with God, so it's right with me, so come at me, you know? So it's about what is true, and if it's true, then stand firm to it. If it's not true, then you might need some reevaluation. But like also the things of society, you always have to take it with a grain of salt, because they might be true in some aspects. You might just actually not be, I don't say worthwhile, but you might just not have the pull or desire. But I also think that you just might not have been looking in the right spots, or you might have ignored the attention from those that were showing interest in you, and or their hints were too subtle for you or something. But there's always more than one explanation than just that. But mindset is definitely one thing. And also when going into relationships, I think it's just not best to put your insecurities on other people. That's definitely something for you to figure out. So I think in the eyes of God, every human being is worthwhile, is worthy of love, because they are loved. But to rely solely on what society thinks, especially when society is low-key garbage, you're going to have some trash feelings about yourself if they're not meeting the expectations that you have of it, which usually they don't. Next.
Never were shown any romantic interest.
Hello, I would love to join your support group, and I also have some thoughts about this. Having the experience of never being desired when I was younger just makes me realize how I internalized so many things about myself that weren't true or just didn't matter. Like, so many of my thoughts were consumed by, am I not pretty enough? Am I not interesting enough? Am I not smart enough? Am I not funny enough? And not just enough for men, but just in general, was I enough? And as I've gotten older, I've gotten over that, but it's just interesting to me to just sit back and reflect and think about how I really believed that I wasn't enough of a human being just because people weren't desiring me romantically. Like, that just so isn't true, and it's crazy how we internalize those things about ourselves. Another consequence of the whole never being desired thing is, like, now that I'm older, being in a relationship is just not a priority to me, because my whole life it's never felt like an option that I've had. I'll probably make a part 2 because I have a lot more thoughts, but that's just it for now.
I definitely understand this. I think another consequence of the whole never being desired when you were younger situation is not knowing how to interpret flirting versus being nice. So I always assumed, and still do, that nobody could ever like me, so if anybody's ever expressing interest in me, it has to be a joke. So I get pretty dismissive as like a defense mechanism, but at the same time there's also this consequence of easily getting attached to anybody who gives you attention, because it just feels so rare, like you're never gonna get it again. So I think lots of people experience varying degrees of this. I have definitely noticed myself in unhealthy situations, even though I've never actually been in a relationship before. Wow, isn't romantic trauma so much fun? But I'm thankful for all my trauma because it helped me develop a sense of humor, so it was worth it.
I feel like we use trauma too much in a way that it's not needed to be used, like romantic trauma. No, that's just my take on it. But I think part of what she was saying, I feel like part of it is starts in the household with parents and making sure that they're providing that right level of love and attention, and like letting them know that there are some things that matter and the opinions of others that don't know you don't. So I don't know. I think it's a dynamic. Not trying to say that her parents never loved her or anything like that, because I don't know her. She's a 1 and 0 on the internet, just like I am. But I think some of those issues don't stem just from society, but just how the parents are raised. Not necessarily all the time, but just an observation. Next.
Those of us that were never asked out, never asked to any dances, never were shown any romantic interest.
Yes, it does. I can confirm because I'm 27 and have never been properly asked out or even taken out on a date. Ever. Not in junior high, which, that's not really legit, but whatever. Not in high school, not in college, not in the year that I've been in grad school. It just hasn't happened, and it's definitely fucked with my head because I have a lot of social anxiety from being isolated and excluded socially and not being shown affection in the same way that my peers were. And I don't know how long that's gonna take to unlearn, and it actually makes me even more anxious than I already am.
So with her, I mean, not to be offensive, she seems a little bit on the spectrum, and looked up her TikTok profile. She has like the handicap sign in her profile, so take that with a grain of salt. Point of the matter is, I think the stuff like this is like, and this whole problem, again, with everything else, is trying to change how the world works and how the world operates. And there's some things that are easier. Is it going to be easier to change the entire world to be that perfect place that you want it to be, or is it going to be easier to change yourself? So it's just like, she says unlearned, like unlearn this need of hating herself or whatever, if I'm phrasing that incorrectly. But I think it's a matter of, okay, so if the entire world is against you, if the entire world doesn't think that you're good enough, worthy enough, pretty enough, then what? What are you gonna do? You just gonna mop and mope about it? Are you going to change your mindset, do some self-meditation, work on yourself, be comfortable with your flaws, understand that that might just be a reality you live with, and continue on with the day? It sounds really, really hard. It sounds really, really... I'm listening to myself. I'm like, ooh, don't be a dating coach or don't be a life coach. But it's just a matter of, you can only change your mindset. Be happy with who you are. Be happy with you. I mean, I guess this is everything that they're trying to say in the video, but I don't know. I don't think it's a matter of unlearning as much as it is reacting to the reality that we live in. But I'm sure like everyone has their niche or their person that's out there for them, I think, anyway. And then also maybe some people just aren't called to the life of relationships. Go to the next video before I get myself in trouble.
Scientists do a case study on those of us that were never asked out.
No, because I want to keep talking about this because I'm now just processing all of this information in my head. Using myself as a case study, here's some conclusions I've come to. Obviously made me super insecure about my looks and personality, even though I always had people tell me, oh, you're so pretty, why don't you have a boyfriend? And then that oddly made me more insecure as well, that comment. Reflecting on it now, literally never being asked to a dance. Like, I deserve to be asked to prom. Like, showing up to prom pictures with a huge group of people and being the only one there without a date, low-key traumatizing. Now, as a 22-year-old, I still have no idea when someone's flirting with me. I just assume people are being nice to me, and then I'll have like friends be like, oh no, they're flirting with you. I have no idea because that's just not a common occurrence for me. I never even had a talking stage or like hugged someone romantically until my sophomore year of college. And now I'm so disinterested in romantic relationships, like it doesn't even cross my mind or is like on my agenda for life. I can go my whole life without a romantic.
Okay, so that was the end of that series, and it was kind of a lot. And so one thing that I found that was interesting was that a lot of these women are coming from the traditional perspective that it needs to be the man that comes to ask the woman for attention or whatnot. And so kind of what this makes me think of, again, as I said at the beginning, is the inverse of this, which is the incels of the male community who don't seem to be receiving that same attention from women, or they've been rejected by many women just because of the way they look or what have you. And my advice for them goes the same for the woman. Like, your identity and your self-worth can't come from anything of the world. Like, if it does, it's not going to mean anything, because the values of the world are continually, constantly changing. And so it's helpful, at least for me, in my faith and my walk, that my identity comes from Christ and my value and worth comes from Christ and God alone. So that is helpful, but it's interesting because like you look, I look at this, I'm like, okay, well, did you try to, like, if you say you have these feelings that you want, but no one, like no male ever approached you about them, like have you tried reaching out to someone that you found attractive or that you liked or whatever? And so it's like looking at the vice versa of this. But I don't know, I just thought it was an interesting video that kind of highlighted the disparages between men and women, because like in this, I mean, a lot of the mindset overall is not a good mindset. Like everyone is valuable, everyone is worthy in the eyes of God. So your identity shouldn't come from what society thinks of you, even if it's true to some extent. But yeah, I'd like to know what you think. It's a longer video, but like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I'll catch you in the next video.